So today it's quite something, because we have to do heavy lifting because we have 2 evenings to cover. So this is now going to be extremely rich, like the cheesecake. So don't have too much before. So our last meeting was supposed to be around contemplation around play, free play, and this evening was around the forces of childhood and the preservation of forces of childhood. And reflecting upon it, actually it's a blessing that they come together, because they really belong together. Because when we talk about the preservation or the protection of the forces of childhood, what then will come to mind as one of the really main supporting activities for children is free play. So I will start with the forces of childhood, and I will only touch briefly on it, because that has a lot to do with thinking about child development. But I would like to introduce a little bit that thinking that I think we work on all the time, that children have a different level of consciousness, and their consciousness is actually changing and unfolding. And whenever we as parents or teachers run into these moments of challenge, like in spring every single year we have that, then there is a shift in consciousness in the children, and that causes unease and usually some kind of discomfort and some kind of tension. We have that right now in our classroom, and it's something that we not necessarily immediately want to embrace, because it's so lovely when things are so lovely. But once one thinks about the child really widening their consciousness, one then becomes much more curious about that. And I read a very lovely quote recently that was about the awakening of consciousness. It was by Marie-Louise von Franz, and she said, awakening consciousness is identical to the creation of the world. So awakening consciousness is identical to the creation of the world. So what does it mean when we have consciousness? It means that in ourselves we create the world. Because the world is out there, and you all experience the world as I, but I am quite certain that we all have very different experiences, and our consciousness level is different, and our sensory apparatus is different, so we take in very different things. And by that, our worlds are all different, although it's all the same world. And I thought that's very interesting, and I always, when I'm with the children, I always ask myself, what do they really experience? What is that they really are experiencing? And it's surely not what I do experience, and I always am very humble, and when later talk a little bit about play facilitation, it will come in that we have to realize that that this place where we are so biased, we observe children in their play or in their actions, and we are very biased by our own concepts. And they are different, and as we are also a collection of very international people, we all have very different concepts, and we will interpret the same behavior very differently. So the child, according to how we will look at the child, lives in a consciousness level that we refer to as dream consciousness. And obviously they not always are in this consciousness. So we as adults, we are usually, when we are awake, we are awakened in our consciousness. We are highly alert, unless we drink too much wine or use other products to dull our consciousness, but we are right awake. When we are asleep, hopefully we are really right asleep. And then there is this little transition that we sometimes experience when we come out of deep sleep and we are not yet awake. And I think that transition is really where the child lives. It's not deeply asleep and not really awake. And not all the time are they in this place, and our society and our lifestyle rips them out of that place. But that is this force of childhood that we want to preserve. So we want to create something for children that they can live in this state of dream consciousness. And how can we do that? We can do that when we are with children and we do not attack them with our concepts all the time. We do not talk at them all the time, but we create an environment in which that it's a lively dreamlike stage, because your children are not like when I wake up, I'm very calm still, and they are lively in that state. They are exploring the world, but they are in this consciousness state. So how will we create that for the children? And obviously one aspect that we talked about a lot already before is the rhythm, because when there is a rhythm, the children are accustomed to, they come into the environment and they know exactly what's going to happen, and they can stay in that place where you do not have to be highly alert. Because you don't ask yourself what comes next. You know that you play now, and after play comes cleanup, and then comes mousy snack, and then comes circle time, and then comes rest time. And you know your day, so you can relax. And relaxing for children really means to get into this place of dream consciousness. And one of the really the major aspects of our work is play. And so that is my introduction to the forces of childhood, and I will take this theme now into talking about play because it is so intimately related. You cannot really separate it. So play for the children. There's a very nice quote that I want to bring from one of my favorite poets, Friedrich Schiller. He lived from 1756 to 1805. So a long time ago. And he said something that I think is very true today as it was in those days, and it's kind of a humbling experience when we think about evolution of human consciousness and progress, that there are certain things that are human, and they were human 200 years ago, and they're still human today. And in a way it's reassuring, because we always say everything is changing so drastically right now, but there are certain aspects, I think, where one can reassure that there is something that stays with us. So Schiller said, the human being is only a human being so long as she plays, and a human being plays so long as she is a whole human being. I will say it one more time. The human being is only a human being so long as she plays, and the human being plays so long as she is a whole human being. And it's really, it's encouraging that in the last 10 years or so, maybe 15 years, that it is much more widely accepted that the main work of children is play. And although we know it, play in the stage that we really aspire to is disappearing. And it's actually the play that we wish for is a self-initiated, self-directed play by the child. That means the child can actually do what they desire to do. And it is disappearing because, not that we have bad intentions, but we feel that we want to direct the child all the time. So we give them goal-oriented play. We even give them play materials that are restricting, rather than giving them open play materials. And later, after we spoke a little bit, and we ate a little bit, and we had a little bit of our beverages, we will go and we will try to play. And I want you really to try in that moment to explore materials and pretend that you have no concepts in your mind. Pretend when you stack up the blocks and you build the houses like we do, or take the play stands and build the roofs, that you never did that before. And the children, you see that every day, they explore and they fail. And then they explore again and they fail again, because there's gravity that always works against them when they climb up or build high up. And yeah, I want us to really later try a little bit how we can do that as adults. So the disappearance of this self-directed play, and that free play also comes through our environment, because we're not living in the woods any longer or on farms, and so we have to keep our children safe when we go to playgrounds. And I can only encourage you to go wherever there is nature, and it can be in a park where there not necessarily are playgrounds, to also go there. When we go to the garden, there are no swings, and I love swings, the real swings. I think they're great for children, and one should go there at least once a day and really fly up into the sky every day. Even as an adult, I like to do that. But there has to be a place where we are just in nature, and where we just can explore what nature brings us. And the children right now, it's spring, they're digging, and obviously they're finding lots of worms, and we do a lot of nature observations, and they're just at their own pace, and they're, we would say, roaming around, and they're finding things that they are interested in. The play of nature for the child is really, it's like eating food. It's like sleeping. If children cannot play, they cannot be healthy. And because it is such an elemental force in children, it's really for us so very important to look at it, and to look very seriously at it, and to really ask ourselves what it really takes to have self-directed, self-initiated play. What does it give the children? So when you see them play here, the feeling you really get from the children is that feeling that they have satisfaction. They really, we sometimes as adults have that. I find myself when I do something creative and I make something beautiful, I feel this feeling of, I feel content and at the same time excited. And I think that is when the children are satisfied. And they also are joyful, which I think is something we often, we do not really pay so much attention to joy. We talk a lot about happiness, and I recently listened to a book, The Book of Joy, by the Dalai Lama and Desmond Tutu. And it's a very, very nice reminder, especially by these two men who had very interesting lives and challenging lives, how they speak about joy. It's something I can just recommend. It's something I think one has to cultivate, to be joyful despite challenges. And we have challenges when we play, because we have to get our materials, and our friends have our materials, and there is a lot going on, and they sometimes don't want to play what we want to play, so there is lots of negotiation at the age here, 3, 4. And Jane promised to talk a little bit about the arc of play later. I will speak a little bit about the different forms of play. So play for us is really wrestling with the material world. We are arriving on Earth. We cannot even yet lift out our head in the beginning, right? And we are very needy, and we have people care for us. And as we develop capacities, then we start to wrestle with the material world around us. And it's wonderful if this material world is not only antagonistic, but it's also beautiful and meaningful, and it allows us to trust into the world. So when we are in nature, I think we always find that, because nature, although can be harsh, it is very truthful, and it is regenerative, and it has a rhythm to it, and if one lives through a few years, one finds oneself feeling so excited when the first blossom comes out, and we walk to the garden and the children say, "Oh, look, the blossoms up there, I saw a daffodil." And so we are very excited by this recurrence of life that is emerging. Play for the child comes in developmental phases, and I will skip over what I have prepared there. And shall I or shall I not?
You don't have to skip.
Good. I touch a little bit, and you go back to it. So the younger child, we talked in our last conversation series about imitation, and out of the different forms of imitation, there are these 3 different phases how children imitate, and this is also how they play. So when they're very, very young, they really explore the material world. The young child will go into the cabinets and will use pots and pans, and will get like Bella this morning. I hadn't set up for a 15-month-old to be in the classroom for the planting, so he immediately went over to the sink and he dug his hands into the soil to explore everything, where the children that are 4 years old know, oh, this is an activity that's set up for later, and they leave it in peace, right? So they have some kind of restraint. But Bella is still exploring the world and wrestling with the material. And he had the soil in his face later, and it went very fast, and he was very pleased. So that's the first way of how we play. We really explore the material world. And then comes this time of fantasy play, where this is the realm where we are in right now, where a lot of comes out of the world that we imitate, the world that we see, but we get in a flow, and anything is possible in this kind of fantasy play, even the things that for us adults are not possible. So when we adults sometimes observe children having their play scenarios, we feel so inclined to interfere when they set up family situations that are really impossible, right? But the children, for them, everything is possible. And that's one thing in self-directed play that one has to hold back. That's one's bias. To interfere with certain play scenarios that are not really what could happen. Here, anything can happen. And out of this fantasy-rich play, the child then, when it gets older, in pre-K and in kindergarten, they become very intentional. So they will not come into the classroom in the morning and just see the blocks and feel reminded of what they built yesterday, the house or the train, or this week it's police cars. I guess some of us experienced something over the weekend that we have to play police cars right now. They will come into the class and they already will know what they want to play, because they had ended the play the day before and they have a clear plan what they need and what they want to do and how they will unfold it. So that's a much more, we would say, intellectualized play, but not in the way that it is locked into concepts, but it's very directed by the child's growing consciousness, how the world functions around us. These are these three developmental phases in a nutshell. So what is the role of play in a biography? And I find that very, very interesting to contemplate. When I started to read Steiner and learned about world of education, it always struck me when people said, the way children play is the way they conduct their life later. And I look back at my play as a child and I felt very self-conscious because I really didn't play so much. I would make like toys for my sister who had a Barbie and she had Ken, and they needed new clothes and they needed like a house and beds and chairs, and I would build all of these things and would give them to her and she would play with it. So I felt very self-conscious because I felt, wow, I'm not a good player, so maybe as an adult now I'm not really living my adult life in the right way. So I felt judged, but that was also my bias, right? I should not have had that. But if I look at my life, this is how I conduct my life. I like to create things. I like to do things. I like to shape things, perform things, and not only with yarn or so, but also when I create the classroom or I create the lecture series or something. It's a different approach, and I know that I am not necessarily like a free spirit like my sister was. And she conducts her life much more as a free spirit than I am very much thinking things over. So we have something that goes through our biography, and it's very, very fascinating when you work with little children, that you look at their play and you ask yourself, what is that really that you see? And you really see a child's individuality in their play unfolding. And I'm not saying that adults, we cannot further ourselves. This is our last conversation series on self-development, right? We always strive to do things differently. I strive to get looser and not think so much and just do things in a crazy way one day or the other. That's our self-development, but we bring something with us that is just our inner nature. It's who we are. And it is, when we can leave the judgment out, it's really very fascinating to see that. And when we have children play here, we see that children are drawn to different kinds of play. And I want to use this idea of how play is something that is is can be seen in our biography. I want to use it to talk a little bit about the types of play that we see in a classroom. And obviously, we are trying to separate them a little bit, and they're overlapping, right? There is not one type of play here exclusively happening in another. But I want us to think a little bit, because sometimes we say, oh, this child is not playing. And maybe this child is not playing ever in the play kitchen like other children and setting up the tea table and playing tea party. But maybe this child is playing in a different way, right? Setting up puppet shows, or is a construction worker, or is a player that plays more inwardly and is just watching. And then only in a quiet moment will play outward. And it's very, I think it's very interesting to contemplate these, and I will talk about 6 different kinds of play. And I will direct them a little bit towards us as human beings, right? We have an up and then a down, we have a left and a right, and then we have a forward and a backward in us. So we have 6 directions. And in a way, we could look at play now in this kinds of 6 directions. So the first kind of play is the one that very young children will play, and it's like the wrestling with the material world. It's the exploration of what's around us. It's Bella digging into the soil and putting it all over her, and it's us going into the garden and digging for earthworms. It's us trying to build a pile of blocks and seeing how gravity affects it, and have the blocks fall down all the time. It's a real wrestling with the world. And this kind of play, it comes out of our thinking, so it's our upwards. So when we play downward, I would call that play physical play. This is when we really explore our entire body. When we go through our thinking into our limbs and our will comes out. So this is when the children climb trees, when we scooter, when we run in the garden, when our full body is involved. That's a second type of play, and it's often seen in kindergartens as rough play. And it can get out of control, because children, especially boys, tend to want to meet each other in their physicality. And that's not necessarily something that our culture embraces, and it's also something that needs to be supervised. But some of us really love to experience their bodies. So there's George, for example. George likes to be squeezed, right? And when I squeeze him, he will laugh, he will giggle, he will feel his whole body. If I would do that to Bella, most likely Bella would just not like that and would like walk away. But George comes and he wants to be squeezed. He comes into me with his head, and I know now he wants to be squeezed. He wants to bump his head into my head. He wants to feel his body. So that's the downward play. In kindergarten with the children in the garden, when they wrestle, we obviously have to limit that at times when it gets out of control. Also here in the classroom, sometimes when they all pile up in a pile, this is this kind of play, and we will interfere to keep it safe. But children need that. Actually, it's also a good place often where fathers can come in, and where they can really wrestle with the children, or go out and throw balls, and where athletics comes in, and really the body is our playing field. Then we have a play where we rehearse roles or scenes that we see outside. Family play. We have some children who always play in the kitchen. They always set up, one is a baby, one is a grandmother, one is a mother. That's a play that comes where we really work from inward out. And it's informed by imitation. And as I said before, we imitate and we transform. Mm-hmm. So children are not necessarily copying in their imitation. They take in play themes and then they transform them into their world. And especially in the middle age of young children, where our fantasy is so free still, our play is then timeless and has all kinds of opportunities and options. We are not limited by the concepts of the adult world at that age. And it's very, very beautiful. That's a play that comes from inward that comes from outward in, I mean, from the imitation, and then we digest it and we send it out again. What children need to play in that way are what we call open-ended toys. And you see that here in the classroom, and I want you later to explore that. We have these crowns and we have play strings, and the children make anything out of it. They put the crowns on their heads and become kings. They put them around their chest, and they use the play strings around their chest, and they become doctors, or they become policemen or firemen, and anything, and the red capes, they can transform into anything. So we do not need a police uniform here to become a policeman. They actually would find the play clips very conducible to have guns, but we are not allowed to have guns indoors because it's really too dangerous for us here right now to have guns. But they entered in today, and we had to take them out of the classroom. So it's not safe enough. But open-ended toys, I want you to really look at the toys and see what it is. The good news about open-ended toys is that you really need a limited set of materials, and they can play anything. And the wonderful thing about playing with open-ended toys, it's actually a pre-algebraic skill. Because if I take this block and I say this block is my telephone, and I take the same block and this block becomes my cheesecake, and I take the same block again and it's my laptop, I am actually doing algebra, right? The block is X and X is a cheesecake, right? This is algebra. The block is A and A is my cell phone. The block is B and B is my iPad. So that's a kind of a thinking that's way beyond where we are consciously, but we are very able. We do not need a real cheesecake to play cheesecake. We do not need a real telephone to play telephone. On the sad note, I know everybody knows our really, oh, you heard about that? Our telephone?
Heard the phone got smashed.
The phone. We had this beautiful gorge that had this old-time telephone, and one day a block crashed on it. We harvested all of the seeds that were inside, because when we shipped it, it was so beautifully bright. I mean, it was so perfectly bright, but now it's gone. We don't have an old-time telephone any longer. We have to grow now a few old-time telephones. So, but that's the open-ended toys. It's really important. And I want us later to have conversations about it when we look at toys in our classroom. So the fourth way of playing is play as a healer, and that is when we play what's in us and we can play it out. Not all children play like that, and it is a basis for play therapy, and not all children have to play like that, but you often see it in children when they struggle with something inwardly. You can see it in their play coming out, and when we can observe that, we can actually facilitate children playing like that. And I think what they really need most in these moments is not our comment, but is our presence as very neutral observers. To just be there for them to play out what they need. And if they have the question, they will ask us, and if not, it's enough for them to play it, and it's enough for us to just see it and listen with an openness and not with a judgment. So that's the fourth kind of play, and then we have a play that comes from the past and a play that goes into the future. The play that comes from the past is when we play out stories. So we listen to stories and then we act them out, and children then play puppet show when they watch puppet shows. So that's a play that comes from the past. And then another play that is the play that goes towards the future is a very beautiful kind of play, and I would summarize it as floor play. There are many kinds of it, and it's when children play on the floor and they often lay out materials in patterns, sometimes in mandalas. Last year, I remember when Maya was here, she would take all of the coupler blocks and the bean bags, and then she would make like a structure that looked nearly like a skeleton, like the ribs of a skeleton and the spine in the middle. So that's a play, it's a calm play that children play. They sometimes build whole landscapes, and they only can do that if they have materials to do that. So they would need like a whole basket full of blocks, of shells, and silks, and play strings, where they can really lay out patterns. And as I said, not each child plays in all of these 6 forms. But it's for me very helpful when I think of the human being and the 6 directions in which we live, to look at the play of the children. I think in conclusion, and I hope I left enough for you, pretty much more than you wanted maybe. I just wanted to summarize what I spoke about a little bit, that in regard to play, that play is very multidimensional. There is not one kind of play. And when we say a child doesn't play, it's maybe we do not really look carefully. The most beneficial play for children is really a self-directed and self-initiated play. How to accomplish that and to be a play facilitator, I leave to Jane to talk a little bit about. And I also wanted to really make clear that play is a fundamental need for children. It's something we as human beings, we deserve, we need. It is like food and like sleep. And I want you to, when you now look at your child and their play, I want you to openly really look at their play and see their individuality. Remember in our conference when George asked when it is a time to set the seed, that we find ourselves later in life, that we know who we are. And it's from birth on. And we show what we ought to become. Sometimes we cannot fully become what we desire to become. Sometimes we have these moments where we can become that. But it's a little bit, when you think about the play, you see it, and then comes the years of schooling, where we gain skills and social abilities, and where we learn, where it goes a little bit underground. And then in your 20s it comes back up. But it comes back up as how you can take up life, how you approach life. And you can go home and you can maybe reflect, how did you play as a child? Can you see that in yourself still? Is there still the same being there that was there? And I would be certain that there's still the same being in you, because you're still the same person. So I pass it over to Jane, and after Jane is done, I think I'm looking forward to speak about a few things and to play a little.
I concur that observation of play is just such a rich way to be observing the ideas and thoughts that children that are coming up in them. Is how we know the child, how I know the children in my classrooms, to watch them when they play. It's, you know something about them from what story they take into like that past play, what story appeals to them to then play out. You know something about them by which ways they're really choosing repetitively to engage in that physical play. It is hard to reserve judgment when watching children play. When they're, at their most free, sometimes it's very uncomfortable to watch. Either because, there's some physicality that is like something an adult would not do, or that has some element of risk, but also because their formation of like social construct, social boundaries is not what we have. So you might think, oh, that's mean, or that's, that's like rude, or there are a lot of feelings that come up in us. So it is hard to sit back and to just be an observer, especially when it's your own child. I know. Watching my own children play, even when it was just the two of them together in our own home. Really? And watching children play can also be very uncomfortable. I should tell Anke and Patricia about Mars and Redma playing Miss Anke and Miss Patricia. It's very flattering, really. So it can be really uncomfortable watch. I have a different lens to put on observing play, especially in the younger age group when they're really grappling with like finding their place in the physical world, and understanding how things in the physical world work, and that's the idea of play schema. Now, it's not really something that is written about a lot in Waldorf circles, but it's in Reggio Emilia and other philosophies of education for the young child is talked about quite a lot. And I think it's really interesting because it's being studied that human beings across just different cultures all around the world do these same activities as play. And I'm gonna try not to go through them too much in too great a detail, but there's 9 of them that I want to mention, and it's just like when you know them, you start to see these patterns in play, and it's very like I could hear it in the way Anke was describing different kinds of play too, but these ones are just like it's a little bit going into a little bit more detail or specific actions. Like, so the first one is trajectory, right? It's interesting. It's showing an interest in learning how objects move through space. And so it's throwing, dropping, swinging things, rolling balls, tipping water over, things that we can go like, but it is, it's being studied. It's a fundamental human play for young children because they're trying to understand those things. So, as an observer, we can go, oh yes, great, they're learning about that. As a teacher or parent, you might have to set limits, and that becomes, we do have to limit children's play. But when you know that they're doing these things out of a need that's common across human beings, you can be a little more understanding when they dump something over for the zillionth time. The second one is positioning or categorizing. It's like, when Anke spoke about creating mandalas, even in the tiniest children, you see them start to do this, start to create patterns, start to pick out all the yellow blocks in the basket, or start to line something up. So it's lining, ordering, creating symmetry, creating things with symmetry, and it's all these, early math. They're exploring concepts of order, alignment, sequencing, and children all around the world, they do it. And it's magical sometimes when what they're able to create, and you see this order in their life. The third one is transporting. This is the one I see the most every day. Moving things, carrying things, collecting things, dumping things, putting things in bags and pockets, shifting sand, shifting mud. And you don't need to explain that one very much. It's like, how do things get from here to there? And how do I fit into that process? Fourth is connecting, taping things together, tying things up, gluing, building things, joining train tracks. Also sometimes like the process of opening and closing things, magnets. And then, when they're getting more developed, that it's like weaving things and making things. I think this is one of the schema that Anke is still stuck in, or most interested in. It's where you're drawn, connecting things together, making, the makers amongst us. And then there's number 5, transforming. And this is one that drives us all. Like it can be seen as something really destructive, because it's all about how do I change something. Like it's very experimental. It's like mixing things together, like pouring your tea on top of your bread roll at the snack table, or making things wet, breaking things. Breaking things. That process where you just really want to tear things apart. It's very sensory. Dissolving things, melting things, making things wet, including, ourselves. And it's all the way the children are trying to understand change, how different component parts of something fit together, and just like simple cause and effect. So we do it. We transform things. 6 is rotation. This is spinning, rolling down a hill, going round and round, running round and round, spinning toys, bicycles, and it's all about developing your own sense of balance and coordination and sensory processing. So it's like related with your vestibular development. Like, where am I in this space, right? Number 7 is enclosing. It's putting things in, usually with the lid or boundaries. So when children construct, they often you'll see like a lot of fences or like there's a boundary to it or a cover, like building forts. Filling and emptying things is also like enclosing things, putting things in and out of containers, and they're learning about like that concrete nature of objects and refining their spatial awareness through this kind of enclosing things. You see it and enveloping, which is very similar, is also like wrapping things up, hiding things, obscuring things from view. So like building forts is a big one, hiding in boxes. And it's all about finding shapes, space, measuring, developing their body awareness and their sense of spatial awareness. So enveloping and enclosing, a little bit different but very connected. And then the last one is that I listed is orientation. This one manifests as like flipping myself upside down or flipping the furniture upside down, or it's like, or climbing up high to see what something looks like from up here or down from down here. And it's like finding perspective and activating your vestibular system. So this up, down. And I think like when you think about these and start to notice the patterns, like especially if you come to the seedlings class or seeds, they're doing all these things all the time, and some children are really drawn to some over others. You have your transformers and connectors who are making things and turning things apart, and then you have your transporters who are just like moving things around everywhere. And it's dizzying, but they're all working. They're working when they're doing these things. It's really like there is actual purpose to all of it, and I think a lot of people out there in the world, if you've never had young children, or even when you're kind of new to parenting, or if you just haven't sat and observed play for a really long time, the purpose isn't immediately evident, but it really is there. And I want to encourage like that observation of purpose in those seemingly random activities. They're not random. There is a pattern. And I thought that I should say that kind of schema play, all those things it's not only in the sort of fantasy play, like they do carry it through. It becomes a little bit more sophisticated, they develop a sense of what the limits are around that, so they may not be dumping out every basket full of toys anymore, but they still might really enjoy like pouring the tea at the table, or they still really want to do those kind of actions. So that's in terms of play facilitation. In that stage of play, it's about giving a little space and not judging things to be purposeless when they really do have like a meaning behind them. Because when we're pre-language or we're just developing words, they can't explain what they're doing. They just know like this goes here, or this I'm gonna knock this over, or they're just doing. They can't articulate. They don't have this rich imaginative. They might have in their head some imagination around what they're doing, but they can't really express it yet. So play facilitation at that stage is just giving a little space and having a little understanding of when things are going what appears to be wrong, the hands in the dirt. But it's still play. It's still play. Then, as you know, it still can be uncomfortable in observation of play as we get to a stage where it's when they're trying to play cooperatively, when they're playing parallel but there are not enough materials for each one, or when they're incorporating a fantasy, an imaginative life into their play. They may, as Anke had mentioned, like be playing out something that's difficult that they're processing, something they've seen or experienced or just want to understand in the world. I think the role of a play facilitator, and anybody can be a play facilitator. You don't have to be a trained teacher. You don't have to be a parent. You just have to know that they need space. If they do need something, if someone is unsafe or there's a child who can't stay in the play, who is coming, looking for direction, you have to know what kind of questions to ask and how much space to give. The best kind of questions to ask are those that are open. What do you think? If you see something unsafe happening, it's also nice to come in with something open. I'm noticing that might be a little unstable, and then see if they have a solution that they can bring to it. It's very easy to be super directive, and I think when we talk about what we've lost in play, that sometimes it seems like children now, or you get an individual child that comes in who seems to really be lost in their ability to play, who seek more direction, then it's just you can act as a bit of a play interpreter. You can talk to them about what you're noticing in the other children's play, so that they begin to notice too and see how they might find their way in, without saying, "Oh, do this." You can say, they have. Do they have a family over there? And who's in that family? Then you listen. Oh, is there anyone? Is there something missing in that? Or you help them find their role. By asking questions, not by telling. I guess is what I'm trying to say. A play facilitator also provides an environment and material inputs. Now, in this classroom, Anke loves the open-ended materials. I also do, but in Maple's classroom, we have a little bit more recognizable things, and that's language acquisition is working so hard in the 2-year-old. So if I give them, a yellow pom-pom and say it's an apple, some confusion can result. So if I give them a yellow piece of wood that's carved to look like an apple, they can begin to open their vocabulary to play with that as an apple, to throw it in the soup pot. So I think there is definitely a place for some some recognizable objects, closed-ended. Okay, and the other kind of input that I believe in deeply as a play facilitator, and it's not something that you can always bring, but is bringing story or narrative that can help feed play, right? So we are surrounded by story and narrative, and a lot of it comes from media. You hear a lot of kids playing out stories that come from a movie or a TV show, but then they're also playing out things that come from a puppet show or a book. I think as people who care about play for children, we can help feed their narratives by giving them these like healthful and diverse like stories from their world. It doesn't have to be complicated at all. Sometimes the simple ones work best. But particularly with a group of children or among siblings, if they have common story threads, then they find ways to play those out together. And it helps bring us together. Let's see if I missed anything. Yeah, I mean, free play, like truly just often does not look how we expect it to look. And it can be so messy and so, there can be so many little signs of conflict, but even the conflicts are needed, because when the stakes are not high, that's how they're learning, negotiation, that's how they're learning, to coexist with a different perspective in the world. And if they're in a safe place to play those things out, can only help their development as a full and moral human being in the future. So when it's uncomfortable, when it's messy, when there's conflict, as a play facilitator, you always want to just give a little time, give a little space, unless there's imminent danger. Yep.
And it's interesting when you learn that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because it's not natural for us to not get involved, and then we step in. But for the first time, I remember when I did not get involved, and within 10 seconds, they resolved the problem. And I don't mean the things where you said where we have to step in, but often they find their own solution. And I think it is very important to be present, and it's very important to sit with the discomfort and to allow something to surprise us. That will come our way that we didn't think that they could really do that. Yeah. And it's a fine line to keep it safe and not to.
And to keep it not only safe, like physically speaking, but the emotions can run high, and there can be hurt feelings as well as hurt bodies.
Yes. Yes, and it's often good then at that moment to just take a pause, and one has to experience this kind of discomfort, I think, this kind of hurt in a way. Yeah. There's one thing that I wanted to touch base on, because it often comes that there are children that get stuck in certain play scenarios, and there is it's an assumption out there that it is a sign of some kind of inflexibility in a child, and that it often is, but it's often labeled in a way. I think when children are really playing one scenario, they have to play it out over and over again. But what we can do in these situations, we can enrich the scenario. So a child, for example, always plays train. So you can enrich it, and you put a little red caboose on the train or your dining car, and all of a sudden the kitchen play comes in, right? So you can enrich. But I think for us to say you cannot play always the same thing, or you can, it's not the right approach. So, and I think when we enter ourselves as adults into play, the word selfless is something that comes to me. So when I go and I play with the children, it's not that I'm going to have fun playing. Not that I ever was that kind of a person playing in that way, but I could see my sister do that. So it's not that. It's like a kind of a selfless play. It's really about the child having that space and time and that opportunity.